And this is sent to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam while the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in Mecca. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam here is told that when the people are behaving like this, they call you majnoon, they call you insane, they call you a poet. And he be gracious, overlook, pardon. The command of Allah Azza wa Jal is coming. And here the scholars mentioned, as a fa'idah Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentioned not about this ayah specifically, but about these kind of ayat, that these ayat are not abrogated. So the scholars, some of them took a view that these ayat are abrogated by the ayat of jihad. The Prophet ﷺ, after jihad was sent, he's no longer told, فَاصْفَحْ الصَّفْحَ الْجَمِيلِ, yani be gracious and let it go and pardon them and forgive them. Instead, he's told, وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ ثَقِفْتُمُوهُمْ وَأَخْرِجُوهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَخْرَجُوكُمْ. Kill them wherever you find them and drive them out of the homes that they drove you out of. Like in Shaykh al-Islam has a view regarding this, again, not this ayah specifically, but generally, that these ayahs are not abrogated. Rather, in the times when the Muslims are mustad'afeen, they're extremely weak, they're the minority, they're under the threat from the disbelievers, so you behave like the Prophet ﷺ behaved in Mecca. فَاصْفَحْ الصَّفْحَ الْجَمِيلِ. Let things go, overlook, pardon. And when the Muslims have strength and authority, so you behave as the Prophet ﷺ did in Medina. So these ayat about forgiveness and graciousness and not taking them to account, there is an application of them today. And that is when the Muslims are in a state of extreme weakness and real, like oppression. That at that time, it's not the time for fighting against those people. Like, can you let many things go? Some things you cannot let go because Allah Azza wa Jalla does not allow you to let them go by the laws of Islam. But where you can let things go and pardon people's ignorance and not take them to account. For example, let me give you an example. Let's say that you're living in a Muslim country with a strong Islamic identity, and a non-Muslim comes up to you and insults you as part of your religion. And he says, you Muslims, you are this and that. And then imagine that same situation happened in a majority non-Muslim country where you're a small group with little power. How are you going to deal with each one? And in the Muslim country, the full power of the state is going to come upon that person. And everything that the Muslims have, the person who insulted you because of your religion, the power of the Muslim state is going to come upon that person. As for in the non-Muslim country, wherever you can let things go, let them go, and don't take it to heart, and pardon them and wait. And in a situation where you are oppressed and where you are in the minority. These ayat, it seems that they have an application. The situation of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca and so on. As-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, As-Safh al-Jamil is the graciousness that doesn't have any harm in it. Rather, he meets the bad treatment of others with good treatment. And he meets the sins of others with forgiveness, so that Allah Azza wa Jal gives him the great reward. And that could be said also, and it could also be said that this is not specific to Makkah, rather this is something that is general about good character, as-safh. And generally, if we don't say about the disbelievers, and for the disbelievers, sahih, it's only in the situation of Makkah. Because Allah Azza wa Jal said, Allah Azza wa Jal said, فَاعْفُوا وَاصْفَحُوا حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ اللَّهُ بِأَمْرِهِ. And that's a nas, right? That be gracious with them until the command of Allah comes. And the command for al-jihad, and that which is related to it, وَلْيَجِدْ فِيكُمْ غِلْظَةً, let them find you to be harsh with them. For here, Allah tells us that until the command of Allah Azza wa Jal comes, be gracious with them. But this ayah doesn't limit it to the disbelievers. Rather, As-Sa'di takes the ayah, rahimahullah ta'ala, generally, that pardon them, forgive them, be gracious with people generally. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. When people treat him badly, he treated them well. When people transgressed against him, he forgave them. And it's said about the Prophet ﷺ that he never took anyone to account for a personal infringement of his rights. He only took them to account for what was a religious infringement, yani an infringement against the religion of Islam. He took them to account for it. And an infringement in the religion of Islam, he took them to account. But he didn't take them to account for a personal infringement on his own personal rights as a person. And if someone didn't give something back to him, or someone didn't fulfill a promise, the Prophet ﷺ never took them to account for it unless it was a religious obligation. He didn't take them to account for it. So he had a safh al-jamil with everyone, sallallahu alayhi wasallam.